Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial for the PMDG 737 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm Emmanuel, I am a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. Before we head out to the aircraft and continue where we last picked off in the takeoff tutorial, I want to go over some brief background that you should be aware of and that might be a little bit too complicated to explain by the time we're sitting in the airplane, since things are going rather fast in a climb. The first one is reduced-full climb thrust. When you're taking off with an assumed temperature and fixed D rate or a combination of both, the FMC will automatically select a reduced climb thrust for you under certain circumstances. And to be fair, it's probably 90% of the takeoffs where you see this. And that is for two reasons. The first of all is, since you are applying a lot of thrust reduction on takeoff, the airplane knows that you also won't need full climb thrust. Therefore, it is giving you a little bit less thrust in order to keep your rate of climb reasonable, since otherwise the 737 does have a lot of thrust, and especially at light weights can easily go up to 6,000 feet a minute rate of climb. Therefore, in order to make things go a little bit slower and to make it a little bit more comfortable to the flight crew, the airplane is automatically going to reduce your thrust. Of course, there's also an economical side of things. Due to the reduced temperatures inside the engine core when it's operating at lower thrust levels, the service life of the engine is also extended by operating at less than full thrust. There are two climb D rates, climb 1 and climb 2. The climb 1 D rate provides approximately a 10% of climb thrust reduction, while climb 2 is providing about 20% of climb thrust reduction. Now, don't confuse climb thrust reduction with your N1, because the N1 does not show you a linear increase in thrust, but you're only going to see a few percent of N1 difference, which then turns out to be actually either 10 or 20% of climb thrust. Now, in order to save some fuel when you are cleared to higher levels, you can delete the climb restriction on the N1 limit page on the bottom line. And we generally do this once we are cleared to or above flight level 150 or 15,000 feet. So when that is done, or rather when ATC have cleared you to level 150 or higher, you can delete the climb 1 or climb 2 restrictions by using the delete key and then go to the N1 limit page and click on the appropriate active climb 1 or climb 2 thrust reduction, so that you're deleting it, and then you can also observe on your engine display that the engines are now spooling up to full climb thrust. That may be as little as just 1 or 2% N1, however that's entirely normal. And you will notice quite a difference on your vertical speed there. The next topic we'll come to is anti-ice usage. Even in summer with temperatures of 35 degrees and higher, as you climb, the temperature outside is getting colder by about 2 degrees centigrade per 1,000 feet. And therefore, at some point, you will eventually need anti-ice, even in high summer season. Now, when do we use anti-ice? Generally, the first anti-ice you're going to use is the engine anti-ice, because that actually works as an anti-ice rather than a de-ice. So anti-ice means preventing ice from building up, while de-icing means removing ice that's already been built up. So when the temperature is 10 degrees or lower, as you can see on your engine display, and there is visible moisture, as in rain, snow or clouds, mostly clouds, then you will need to turn on the engine anti-ice before you're actually entering this area of icing, or this area of suspected icing. Now, there also is a lower temperature limit where you can turn the anti-ice back off, and for that you have to look at the FMC progress page 2 of 2, where you can see the static air temperature. And if that falls to minus 40 degrees or lower, so minus 40, minus 41 and so on, then you can turn off your engine anti-ice. And the reason for that is that at a temperature of minus 40 degrees centigrade or less, any remains of water that is in the clouds are going to be deep frozen and therefore will just peel off your airplane as they hit it, and there is no chance that it could still freeze on your airplane. So to recap this, at a temperature of plus 10 degrees or lower on the engine display, and up to minus 40 degrees on the progress page 2 in the FMC, you will need your your engine anti-ice whenever you are entering clouds or other forms of visible precipitation. Now there also is the wing anti-ice, and that is used slightly differently because even though it is called wing anti-ice, it is actually a de-icer. So you are not going to turn on wing anti-ice just as a preventive measure, but you are actually only going to turn on the wing anti-ice once ice has already started to build up on your airplane. Now, since it's a little bit hard to see the wings and then even judge if there are tiny amounts of ice on the leading edges, there is a good clue on the airplane that you can see right from the flight deck, and that is the windshield wipers. When you're climbing through clouds or descending through clouds, always have a look at the windshield wiper from time to time, because that is going to be your first indication that there is actually ice building up on the airplane. If there is ice building up on the windshield wipers, wait for it to build up for a small amount of time, depending on how severe it is. And then once a little bit of ice has built up, then turn on the wing anti-ice, and that is then going to remove the ice buildup from your wings. Now, why don't we run it continuously? Well, that's mostly because otherwise ice could hit the leading edge, melt a little bit, flow aft on the wing, and then freeze on points where you do not have any anti-ice available on your wing. Therefore, once you've turned the wing anti-ice on, have a good look at your wings, and you might even see some ice flying away there. And after about 30 seconds to a minute-ish, turn it back off. Wait for the ice to build up again, then turn it back on to remove the ice, and so on. One more thing we have to talk about here is the so-called 3-2-1 rule. And that is a rule to prevent nonsense TCAS RAs. Now, why is that, you may ask? Surely air traffic control is not going to clear you into a conflict. And while that is true 99.9% of the time, there however are situations where you are cleared. Let's do this as an example. There are situations where you are cleared to climb, for example, flight level 150. And there is another airplane directly on top of you that's cleared to descend to flight level 160. You can see the two aircraft are, well, cleared of one another, so it is not a cleared conflict by air traffic control. However, if you're climbing at 3,000 feet a minute, and the other airplane is descending at 3,000 feet a minute, and you are both approaching the cleared altitude at these speeds, then your two aircraft are closing at a rate of 6,000 feet a minute. And that is exactly where TCAS might start causing trouble. Because the way TCAS is designed, it's going to give you a traffic advisory, traffic, by the time you are 40 seconds from a potential impact. And by the time you're 20 seconds from a potential impact, it is going to give you a resolution advisory, as in climb or descend. Therefore, we are using the 3-2-1 rule. And this basically says, with 3,000 feet to go to your cleared altitude or flight level, your maximum vertical speed should be 3,000 feet a minute. Note maximum, it's not mandatory to do 3,000. If your airplane does less anyway, keep it doing less. At 2,000 feet a minute, you want to do a maximum of 2,000 feet a minute. And at 1,000 feet to go, you want to do a maximum of 1,000 feet a minute. And this is going to keep you clear of potential TCAS conflicts, because TCAS does not know about your cleared altitude. And keep in mind, you could also be busting the cleared altitude. So that's why TCAS is not protecting you, even though air traffic control might have issued a correct clearance. Therefore, the 3-2-1 rule is going to avoid those nonsense TCAS arrays from happening, since if we take this to the extremes, one airplane has 1,000 feet to go, the other has also 1,000 feet to go, both doing 1,000 feet a minute. That means you're doing 2,000 feet a minute now, approaching each other, and that is going to end up right at the 40 seconds when both aircrafts are leveling off. Therefore, both in climb as well as in descent, maximum 3,000 feet a minute when you have 3,000 to go, maximum 2,000 feet a minute when you have 2,000 feet to go, and maximum 1,000 feet a minute when you have 1,000 to go. Let me also issue a slight warning here. If you are flying at high altitudes where the airplane might have insufficient thrust available to actually keep those rates, especially when the wind is changing, you need to have a very good look at your engine thrust. So let's say you're climbing to flight level 370 and you're doing 1,500 feet a minute. Then you go to vertical speed mode, select 1,000 feet a minute. The next thing you want to do is have a look at your engine thrust to see how much spare there is available. So you have this green N1 limit marker that shows you the maximum thrust available for this situation of flight. And then have a look at your engine thrust. If the actual engine thrust is approaching or is at the maximum thrust, then you should go back to VNAV mode, because it means that the airplane has insufficient thrust available to maintain your commanded rate of climb. So that is something to keep in mind if you're operating at high altitudes. Always check the engine thrust to make sure that you have sufficient thrust available that the airplane can still maintain the rate that you are commanding. Alright, that leads us to the last thing I want to discuss in theory before we head out to the airplane, and that is your bank angle selector. Basically, in the 737-700, it's not yet as much of a problem, but if you're flying a heavyweight 700, or if you're flying one of the larger types, like the 800 or 900, and you are operating at high altitudes, above flight level 300, then by increasing bank, you decrease your limits to the stall or stick shaker. The reason for that is that with bank angle applied, part of your lift is now, or rather part of your lift vector is now not over the airplane helping it, but next to the airplane, pulling it to the side in the turn. And therefore, your margins are decreasing, and at 25 degrees or even 30 degrees angle of bank, your margins can decrease significantly. Therefore, above flight level 300, or when in the climb passing flight level 300, you're going to select the bank angle selector to 10 degrees angle of bank. And that will tell the airplane not to exceed 10 degrees angle of bank, surprise, which therefore keeps you at decent margins. We always change this bank angle selector in the climb, even when we're operating in LNAV, despite LNAV having an automatic bank angle limitation function. So the bank angle selector is only going to limit you in the heading select mode and in other modes, but not in LNAV. In LNAV, the airplane is making its own calculations and will limit the bank angle accordingly. Similarly, once you're descending, don't forget to put the bank angle selector back to 25 degrees so that when air traffic control is vectoring you for the approach, you will have sufficient bank angle available in order to meet air traffic control's expectations. In cruise flight, if you do happen to get a heading, or if you're requesting a heading to avoid some weather, then 10 degrees angle of bank is totally fine. It means that things are taking their time, but that's how things are. We are flying those jets to very small margins up at cruise levels, and therefore things are happening slowly, and that is entirely fine. Alright, that finishes off all the theory I wanted to go over. Now let's head out to the airplane, and I'm going to show you how this is all done in actual flight.